I got accepted into my dream college, but my parents refused to pay just because my brother didn't get into his. Now they want me to give up my dreams for his. So I told everyone about what happened. I, 20 mem, have a younger brother, Jared, and he has always been treated better by my parents. He's just 10 months younger than me, but my parents decided to get us enrolled in school at the same time, so we have always competed against each other since we have always been in the same grade, and the clear winner in every competition has been me because I've always been better at him in every single thing, academically or even otherwise. I've had better grades since the beginning, and had always wanted to go to Caltech to study data science, while my brother had always been more interested in biology and would always brag about how he would grow up and become one of the pioneers of microbiology and do something really big, but he was mostly just all bark and no bite. But in spite of being the more academically inclined brother, my parents refused to pay for me to go to college after 4 years of giving me hope. Around my junior year of high school, I was doing really well, and had a feeling that I might get accepted into Caltech when the time came around. So I sat my parents down and had a proper discussion with them about this, and they promised me that they would definitely cover the expenses for me. It would not even be hard for them because my dad had been running the business that he had inherited from his father ever since he was young, and they had been blessed with wealth right from the beginning, so it was not a big deal for them. But I had just been worried about it because both my parents had to make their own way through college, even my dad. In spite of being rich, my grandfather wanted him to work and pay his dues before he inherited the business, and I was just worried that he might try to do something similar with me. However, my parents always reassured me that they had this, and when the time came, they would make sure that I would be able to go to the college of my dreams without having to worry about the tuition. Even up until the last few days of my senior year, when people had already started applying to colleges, I was under the impression that once I got accepted into Caltech, they would make sure that everything was paid for because they had promised me, and had been telling me that they would take care of everything for the past 4 years. However, when I finally got my acceptance letter from Caltech, they pulled a total of 180 and told me that they would not be paying for me to go to college because Jared, unfortunately, had not been accepted into the college of his choice, and now they wanted me to go to a mediocre college with him, just so that he wouldn't feel bad about himself. To be fair, he had been aiming for Cornell, which was pretty silly of him because his grades were definitely not up to the standard for a college like that. If I'm being honest, he had always been a very average and mediocre student, and I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, but then never even trying to get better and setting your sights so high. That's just setting yourself up for failure, and that's what had happened. So the day that my parents told me about how he had been rejected from Cornell and was going to have to settle for something else, and they wanted me to go along with him so that he wouldn't feel like a failure, I didn't even need to think twice before shutting that down. No matter what he had been through, I had been accepted into the college of my choice, and the most that I could do for him was extend my sympathies. But I was not going to give up on my dreams for him. I might have even considered it if Jared had been good to me at any point in his life, but we just never really got along. From the beginning, our parents had made sure to pit us against each other, and although I tried to be friends with him several times, he always thought of himself as someone who was superior to me. I don't know on what basis, but he simply believed that he was better than me or something. On top of that, our parents always treated him like he really was superior to everybody else, which just reinforced his baseless beliefs and got on my nerves, but I really couldn't help that. And in my childhood, I used to fight with my parents a lot over this, but they would always try to tell me that I was older than him, so I just had to accept that this is how it was instead of getting jealous. I occasionally complained to my maternal uncle about these things since he and I were pretty close, but that was all that I could do. Anyway, when my parents asked me if I would be willing to do that, I said no. And that's when they told me that if I did not agree to their terms, then they would be forced to go back on their word and would not be paying for me to go to college, since I was not ready to make a sacrifice for my brother's happiness. I was infuriated at that point, and we got into a really horrible fight that day, because what they were doing was so unethical on so many levels. They had given me false hope for 4 years, and that's the only reason I did not try to take up any jobs or any internships to earn some cash on the side, and I hadn't even spoken to anybody about student loans or whatever, and it was going to be hard. I already knew that it would be very difficult for me to work through college and pay off my own tuition. I was in a very difficult position, and it was just because my parents were too selfish and could only care about Jared and did not even bother to think about what would become of me. Well, fighting with them did not work. I tried to beg and plead with them, and it was humiliating, but even then they did not agree. So they were very firm on what they had said, and believed that I should give up on Caltech just because they thought that I should value my brother's happiness more. I did not agree with that, and I tried to tell them that the thing that they were asking me to do was not a tiny little sacrifice, but it would be giving up on my future, and I would never be able to stand that. But they did not budge, and I realized that I was wasting my time talking to them pointlessly and trying to make them see sense when they had shown me very clearly where their priorities had been right from the beginning, and I had been a fool to ever trust them. So I packed some of my clothes and books and I left the house that evening itself. They did not try to stop me, and so I showed up at my uncle's house in the evening and told him everything. Like I had mentioned earlier in my post, he and I had always been close, and he had always been sympathetic to birth. He often even tried to make my mother, his older sister, understand what I was going through and see things from my perspective as well, but unfortunately, it never worked. However, that day was the straw that broke the camel's back for me, and I finally told him that I could no longer live with my parents and I was counting on him to help me out somehow. I just wanted him to become a cosigner on my loan application, and then I would find a way to pay it all off, but I just needed his help for that one thing. I was in a pretty hysterical state when I got to his house, and he calmed me down, allowed me to talk about what was going on, and then, after getting to know everything, he told me that he was going to take care of my tuition, and I did not need to worry about it. I was thrilled when he said that because that meant that I would not need to worry about student loans or anything else, since he had promised me that he was going to take care of all of it. And he really lived up to it as well because I was able to go to college and accept my position at the right time, and he took care of all my expenses. He is a dentist, and he makes good money but spends it on me, his nephew, instead of saving it up for his future. That was a really benevolent gesture, and I'm always going to be so thankful to him for it. Anyway, I've been in college for 1 year and I haven't had any contact with my parents for the past year since they did not try to reach out to me either. I guess they know what I'm up to since I've been posting updates on social media, and even though I've blocked them, I still have other family members, and from what I know, they have been in touch with the rest of the family. Apart from my uncle, who cut my parents off as soon as he found out what they had done to me. I was not expecting to hear from them anytime soon, but last week, they decided to pay me a visit in college, and I was so surprised because it was really random and out of the blue. At first, I thought about avoiding them, but then, just out of curiosity, I decided to meet them and we went out for lunch. Over lunch, they told me that they were really sorry about how things turned out and said that they wanted to make things right with me. It all seemed very shady, but I was willing to give them a chance. They had not brought Jared along with him, and when I asked about him, they told me that he had decided to take a gap and was going to start applying to colleges this year again. They were trying to badmouth Jared in front of me when I asked about him, and said that they were really disappointed in him, and said that he was the real failure, which is another reason they wanted to make it up to me, and I was very suspicious throughout the whole thing. And towards the end of the evening they proved me right by telling me that they had actually come to visit me with another motive in mind, and since I seemed to be having a good time, they thought that they would bring it up with me. They told me that they were in the talks with a really big investor for a deal, and they were desperate to have them on board because my parents had a catering business and they were trying to get into the more high-end market, and this guy would be perfect for that since they could tie up with his event management business and do more upper-class events now for better money. They needed me because apparently they had spoken to this guy a couple of times, and they were still trying to work certain things out, and a few days before our meeting, he had mentioned that his younger son had been trying to get into Caltech and my parents had bragged about me going there. And now he had asked my parents to attend a work party and bring me along because he wanted to introduce me to his son, so I could maybe give him tips or guide him or something. My parents had agreed to it, but by doing that they had put themselves in a very difficult position since they were not exactly on speaking terms with me. And the real reason that they had visited me that day was to make things right with me, so that they could bring me along to the party in a couple of days since they believed that this would help them crack the deal with this investor. My parents also wanted me to speak highly of them and maybe boost their image a little bit at the party. What was in this for me, you may ask? My parents told me that they knew that I had spoken to my uncle and asked him for help initially, but now they were willing to cover the rest of my expenses and college tuition, and even give me double the amount of what I needed if I just helped them out with this. So to sum it up, I was getting double the asking price, and the only condition was that I would have to lie about how great my parents were to an investor and attend a party with them. It didn't sound like a bad deal, to be honest, so I agreed, but I had very different intentions. 3 days ago, I finally attended the party with my parents, and once we got there, I did what I had initially planned on doing and gave my parents a taste of their own medicine. After promising them that I would do exactly what they had asked of me when they introduced me to their potential investor, I decided to be as blunt as I could and told him the entire story. I started off by telling him that I was thankful to him for fixing the relationship between my parents and me, and when he looked confused, I decided to elaborate and told him how my parents had finally reached out to me after 1 year of not speaking to me, just because they wanted to get an investment from him and bring him on board. So, technically, I had him to thank for all of this. I also explained the rest of the story, about how my parents had given me hope for 4 years and said that they would take care of my college expenses, and then turn their backs on me at the very last minute, just because my brother did not get into his dream college, and they wanted me to give up on my dream so it wouldn't hurt him. And after that, they cut me out of their lives because I had decided to do what was right for me. After telling him all of this, he and everybody in earshot looked flabbergasted, and most of all, my parents, who had actually gone red in the face, and were trying to avoid looking anybody in the eye. After that, I did not have much to do, so I just called a cab and I went back to campus since it was just a 45-minute drive back there. It's been completely chaotic since my parents have been trying to get in touch with me and making several accounts on social media, using different phone numbers and email IDs, just because I blocked their original ones. They are blaming me for ruining their deal since their investor has stopped responding to them after what I said to him at the party. But that's not really what I have a problem with. I'm only here because of what my uncle said. I told him about what I had done days ago, and I thought that he would laugh along with me, because I finally got back at my parents for what they had done to me 1 year ago. But instead, he did not find it funny in the slightest and said it was really vindictive and mean of me to do something like that, and he believed that I should have just told my parents that I was not interested in helping them out, and I'll let it be instead of going out of their way to do something like this. And since then, every time that we have spoken, he's been very weird and cold towards me, and I feel bad. So Ida for exposing my parents at a work event after promising them that I would help them out. Update 1. So it's been 1 week since the party, and from what I have read, everybody in the comments is pretty much divided on whether I did the right thing or not, and it has just led to more confusion for me. I had been relying on this thread to help me make a decision, but then I decided that I should just go with what my heart says, and I called my uncle up to have a discussion with him. I did not want to speak with him on the phone about something like this, so I asked him if I could visit, and if we could speak in person, and he agreed, so I went to his house yesterday. Once I was there, it was pretty awkward because we hadn't had a proper conversation in the last 1 week after what I had told him. So when I got there, things were very tense, but then I decided to break the ice, and I told him that I did not think that I needed to be guilty or apologize to my parents for what had happened. But since he was somebody whose opinion I actually valued, I thought that I would talk things out with him and explain why I did what I did. He seemed receptive, so I told him that my parents had been promising me for 4 years that they would help me out, and at the very last minute, it just hurt that they had ditched me for my brother, just to protect his feelings. If they had refused to pay for me to go to college because of other reasons, like financial constraints, I might not have been as pissed as I was, but they genuinely expected me to give up on my dreams for my brother's sake and got mad at me when I chose not to. That's what really hurt me. He had already known about this, but I still thought that talking to him about it from an emotional aspect would make him realize how hurt I had been. I also told him that I had always been treated like a priority. Even though I had always tried my best to make my parents proud, it just never seemed to be enough, and I had a lot of built-up resentment against them. On the day of the party, I just decided that I would make sure that they knew what they had done was messed up, and that I could screw them over when it came down to it. I was not going to be taken for a fool. After hearing me out, my uncle only had one thing to say, and that was that if I really believed that I had done the right thing, then he had nothing to say to me. I was dumbstruck because I had really thought that talking to him about my feelings would make him realize that what I had done came from a place of anger, and maybe it was not the right thing to do, but if it made me feel better, he should have just let me have that. I'm not a saint. I can't always do the right thing and let people get away with walking all over me. The fact that my parents had even expected me to take them up on their stupid little deal and pretend that I was on their side just for money was insulting. So I told my uncle that he was free to not speak to me if he wanted to. But that meant that I would not be taking any financial help from him either. It was pretty bold of me to say that, since I did not have any other plan in mind and I didn't know what would have happened if we were not able to sort things out. But when I said that, my uncle seemed to soften up a little and said that it was not necessary for me to get mad at him. He was just upset that I had chosen to get revenge instead of just letting it all go and letting it be in the past. Then, he very calmly explained to me that revenge was never the way to get ahead in life, and I agreed with him. I told him that I knew what I had done was probably not the right or ethical thing to do, but I thought that it was necessary for me to do it, and now that it was done, I was never going to look back again. So we were not able to come to a decision about whether or not I did the right thing, but at least we were able to sort out our differences and clear the air because when I left, we were cracking jokes and making light of the situation, so I think things are okay now. Now, the only problem on my plate is my parents, who are still desperately trying to get in touch with me. But I've just been ignoring them. I honestly don't know what to do about them, so I guess I'm just going to have to continue ignoring them until they realize that trying to message me again and again is not going to help their case. Update 2. Hey, so it's been 10 days since the day of the party, and so far, my parents had only been trying to text me and get on my nerves like that. But this evening they actually up at my college to pay me a visit once again. When I told the receptionist that she was not willing to go and see them, she told me that they were refusing to leave unless I came down and spoke to them, so that forced me to get out of my room and actually go to them. I was scared that they would embarrass me on campus, so I decided to go to a nearby diner along with them, and this time, even Jared had come along. The scary part was that I guess Jared had not exactly spent the last year doing nothing at home. It was obvious that he had been going to the gym and he had become really buff in just a year because while we used to be almost the same size when I had left home, he was really jacked now and was giving me really nasty looks and flexing his muscles. I'm pretty sure he was just there to intimidate me, which was partly hilarious and partly scary because, from the looks of it, I was sure that he would have definitely beaten me up if given the opportunity. Thankfully, it did not come down to that. My parents were only there to talk to me about what I had done at the party, and said the things that I had said were absolutely not necessary, and they wanted me to put out a public post on social media, taking back what I had said, and admitting that I had made it all up so that their reputation would remain intact. They told me that the investor had blocked them everywhere after the day of the party, and they wanted me to set the record straight. I made it very clear that I was not going to do anything like that since even they knew that I was speaking the truth. Yet again, they tried to buy me out, and said that they would write me a check for whatever amount I demanded if I did what they asked me. But I told them that they couldn't buy everything with money, and certainly couldn't buy me with money. After saying that to them, when I tried to get up and leave, my dad lost his mind and he literally banged his fist on the table that we were sitting at as loudly as the court, and said that I was not allowed to leave until we had us things sorted out. That earned us a few looks from the other people at the diner, and I know the owner, so I was able to give him one and he did not kick us out because he could see that something was going on. Anyway, when my dad did that, I started losing my temper too, and I really wasn't scared of Jared because I knew that even if he tried to hit me or something, the owner was right there and he would immediately call the cops. So I decided to stand up to them, and I told my dad that he had lost the right to tell me what I was allowed to do and not allowed to do when he decided that he was not going to cover my college tuition, and I left home. I was an adult now and was not relying on them for anything, so their rules do not apply to me anymore, and I made that very clear to them. So my mother tried to play the "oh, we raised you, and this is how you repay us" card with me, but I cut that out really quick and told them that they only did what was absolutely necessary for me. And it was not like they treated me like a king like they did to Jared. They had always been biased towards him, and had even been fine with that, because they had given me hopes that eventually they would stand up for me when it really came down to it, and provide for me and pay my college tuition, but they did not even live up to that promise. I had pretty much raised myself because all they cared about was my brother, not me. After that, they did not have anything to say, and I told them that I was sleeping, and if they ever tried to pull some nasty crap with me again, I would definitely call the cops on them, and I would even file for a restraining order against all of them. Then, I finally left, and now I'm back in my dorm room, and in a while, I'm going to call my uncle and tell him everything that has happened today. Update 3. Hi, so it's been a month since I last posted here. After my last update, I kind of got really busy with studying and stuff. I have my finals in a couple of days. Anyway, after my last interaction with my parents, they decided not to bother me for a few days. I also talked to my uncle about what happened, and as ridiculous as it sounds, I mentioned to him that I was pretty sure that they had brought Jared along to intimidate me because that's what it really looked like. Maybe I was being paranoid, but I didn't want to risk anything, so I told my uncle that I did not feel safe because of them anymore, and I wanted to file for a restraining order against them. My uncle told me that he was completely fine with that decision, and said that he would arrange for a lawyer as quickly as he could. I was skeptical about how things would work out, but coincidentally, the day that I decided to file for a restraining order was the very day that Jared himself showed up at my college, and once again, he started demanding that I come down to see him, and this time, when I went down, I made sure that I confronted him right in the middle of the lobby so that it would be in a public space, and even if he tried to do something, it would be on camera. He told me that our parents were really upset because of me, and he wanted me to do what they had asked of me, and post that apology on social media. And when I said no, he told me that I had to, or else he would make sure that I faced the consequences. And I, without thinking, told him that I wasn't scared of a no-good idiot like him, and that's when it happened. He punched me, and thankfully, it was all caught on camera, so that's going to make getting the restraining order a lot easier. I was also able to dodge it, and instead of hitting me right in the middle of my face, he ended up catching my cheek, and I'm not gonna lie, even though that hurts a lot, it's still a better alternative to getting my nose broken or something like that, because that pain might have been so bad that I wouldn't have been able to focus on studying. Anyway, the bottom line is that we are easily going to be able to get a restraining order against my family, and I'm really thankful for that. Now, I'm just going to focus on doing well in my exams and make sure that I score well because I have a lot to prove, and I'm going to make sure that I do great things and show my family their place. Thank you so much to everybody who has supported me in the comments and has reached out to me. It means a great deal that so many people have bothered to read and keep themselves updated on what's going on with me. I think I'm going to take a break for now, and I'll be back when I'm rich and successful, hopefully.